Today, I'm going to be speaking with Tristan Snell, lawyer, legal commentator, former New York AG who prosecuted Trump University, and also creator of the book podcast newsletter series, I guess we might call it, Taking Down Trump. A number of iterations. Tristan, really great having you on.
Thanks so much, David.
So, listen, to start with, I think some in my audience know a little bit about Trump University and the
hmm
civil suit and kind of everything that went down. Talk to me about how you first became aware, hey, there might be something here to investigate.
Yeah, it was my second day in the office. I was a newly minted assistant AG. This was back in 2011, and it's actually how I opened my book to describe this. And what people don't realize about offices like even the New York AG, we think of these, oh, it's high powered offices, these big shot prosecutors. The way I described it is that it's less like TV and more like the DMV. Like if you're used to watching Billions or Suits or something like that, it doesn't look like that. It is stained carpet and stained old ceiling tiles, and 25-year-old computers and 40-year-old phones, and everything's in paper and everything's dusty. I'm sitting there being like, oh my God, did I choose the wrong job? Like, it's my first job doing anything in government enforcement. And my second day in the office, my bureau chief comes in. It's like, we have this case. It's kind of stuck, but it's against Donald Trump. It might be interesting, but we don't know if there's anything here. What I ended up doing was they wanted me to go interview maybe a few dozen of the victims. I ended up just getting completely obsessed with it and ended up interviewing over 100 because the wealth of material that we were getting from people was just insane. People, as soon as I called them and told them who I was, some people would cry because they were so overcome with emotion that someone was finally looking into it. They felt like there was nowhere for them to turn, that they had been ruined. A lot of these people spent $35,000 on Trump University, and it was a complete scam. They had nothing to show for it. They couldn't get a refund even when they tried, and they felt like no one was ever going to help or fix the problem. It also speaks to like how poorly we feel the system is working, right? That you don't actually think that anything's going to happen to the bad guys anymore and that the good guys are never going to do anything about it. People felt that way back in 2011. I'm sure it's way worse now, but that was where it came from. It came from probably a few hundred hours of interviews with the people that had been ripped off by the scam.
Was there a point where you thought maybe there are misunderstandings here, but it's not an overt ripoff bait and switch sort of thing? Or did you pretty quickly realize this is acutely pernicious?
I probably for the first 10 calls, I was keeping an open I tried to keep an open mind for starters. And I was told to, even
Yeah.
if I had been disinclined. To be clear, this was not like, oh, we're going to go get Donald Trump. No, this was actually one of 5 cases that we were undertaking to look into for profit schools about which we had gotten a decent number of complaints. And we wanted to dig deeper into the Trump case to figure out, like, look, what really happened here. There might not be anything. We might be dropping this. That's how it was started. That's how it was framed for me at the beginning. So I'd say for the first like 10, 15 calls I had, I was keeping an open mind about it and like, look, maybe these people just misunderstood what was going on exactly. But it was very clear that that was not the case. Like, they had been told a series of very clear lies that Donald Trump handpicked the instructors, that Donald Trump was the creator of the curriculum, that it was his secrets and his techniques that you were going to learn, that you were going to be told how to invest in real estate if you just attended this one 3-day session. And then when you attended that session, it was a bait and switch. They upsold you to a more expensive mentorship program. Then when you did that, there was nothing there at the end of the rainbow. There was never a point at which you were then all of a sudden the golden doors are going to open up and you're going to become rich because you've learned how to invest in real estate. There was never that moment. The whole thing was a sham. And it was illegal and unlicensed. They never had a license to operate from the state of New York. They didn't have a license to call themselves a university. Those you can't just show up and do a fly-by-night operation, call yourself a university, call yourself a school. It doesn't work that way. Precisely for this reason, because it can rip people off. People trust in the notion that anything calling itself a university or a school is going to be legitimate. And when that trust is breached, like horrible things can happen.
There are a lot of stories over the last 5 years that we've come to know about the relationship between Donald Trump and his various lawyers. There
Yes.
are so many civil and criminal cases involving this guy that there's so many different lawyers, so many stories about he
Yeah.
doesn't pay, stories about he gets mad at them and tells them, here's how you should be handling this.
Yep.
I know more. This whole
Mm-hmm.
laundry list of stuff. At
Yep.
the time that you were working this case and you started having interactions with the lawyers Trump had in this particular case, what were the dynamics you picked up on, if any, in terms of their feelings about Trump and his Trump University, Trump's feelings about the lawyers, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we learned more about this kind of after the fact. At the time, we were just dealing with this one lawyer for Trump named Avi Schick, and he mostly spent his time screaming at us.
Hmm.
And but the real kicker was, and we learned more about this way later, is that he had a direct pipeline to the attorney general, to Eric Schneiderman, who was the elected attorney general at the time. And then, of course, as everybody knows, resigned in disgrace after a Ronan Farrow piece on his violence toward women came out in the New Yorker. Schick, unbeknownst to us, was also simultaneously during that time period serving as one of Schneiderman's main fundraisers.
Mm.
So, total conflict of interest. Schneiderman should not have been communicating with Schick on this at all. And yet, that's what was going on here. And so, every time we wanted to do something, we were getting undercut upstairs and we didn't know why. And this is a story that I've tried to tell because I think it's a very important one about how people like Trump buy their way to immunity and access and special privilege and special treatment. Right?
Right. I mean,
He
for all the use of the phrase weaponized justice system that he uses now, it sounds like it was weaponized in his favor.
It was weaponized in his favor, and it has been since 1974 when he had his first run-in with government enforcement. He was sued for housing discrimination.
Hmm.
He and his father had about 35,000 units, apartments in Brooklyn and Queens, and there were about eight, give or take, that were eight, a single digit, that were occupied by Black families. That's it. And then, as now, the population of Brooklyn and Queens, the Black population of Brooklyn and Queens, does not quite square with that. If you told me you
No.
had 8 units out of 35,000 in like rural Idaho, I would be like, okay, maybe that makes sense. But in New York, I mean, no, 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 no. He was sued by the Fair Housing Administration, and they counterattacked hard. This was with Roy Cohn back in those years, the notorious McCarthy lawyer, who then worked for a lot of other unsavory characters besides Trump. Cohn had Trump countersue the government and completely disparage and defame the government lawyer and said that she had fabricated the whole case and that it was all made up and so forth and so on. He's been doing variations on all of this for 50 years now. And I think the kicker is we're finally figuring out how to fight back against it, starting with the Trump U case. The New York AG's office is, I think, still the gold standard. I was thinking the Manhattan DA's office was going to get there and had really figured this out, but I'm having my doubts again. The New York, if you want to see how to beat Donald Trump, look at the New York AG's office because, and I'm still going to say we, even though I haven't been there for 10 years, we've done it 3 times and counting. And we're
Right.
going to keep, and I think they're going to keep doing it. Somebody's got to pick up on exactly how to take this guy down.
Well, in a moment, I want to get your thoughts on everything going
Yeah.
on with the current cases. But before getting to that, in now still talking about the Trump University
Yeah.
handling that you were involved in, did Trump ever come to the table, literally or figuratively? Were there any interactions where you saw directly what his thought on the whole thing was?
No, sadly, no. I wanted to depose Trump. I wanted to take his deposition. We had the right to. We
Yep.
could have subpoenaed him. We did subpoena the guy who was the head of Trump University and a guy who was the accountant or comptroller for Trump University, as well as one of the instructors who lived in New York. When you're at a state AG's office, it's a lot easier to subpoena people in your own state. It's a lot harder to subpoena people who aren't. We could have subpoenaed Trump. The office decided not to. They figured that the food fight that would ensue with court battles and motions and all sorts of other stuff would cause more delay.
Right.
And we weren't going to get that much more out of him. And that the rest of the case was so strong because of a lot of documents that we'd managed to uncover, other testimony that we had, as well as some things that we had gotten by virtue of the civil class action that was going on in parallel with ours. That was the case pending in federal court in San Diego that yielded the infamous "that Mexican judge" comment from Donald Trump during the
Yep.
2016 presidential campaign. We had enough of a case that we decided not to actually depose Trump. And no, he never attended any of the settlement meetings. The case almost settled. We had multiple different conferences, sit downs with opposing counsel. During those things, Michael Cohen was there at one point. George Souriel was there at one point, but we did not see Trump. And everything that we found out about Trump and his relationship with the lawyers was stuff that really we were able to, or I was able to find out after the fact. I'll say one thing though. In retrospect, at the time, back in 2013, it was when we first started seeing opposition briefs from Trump after we had filed our case. It was insane. The guy we thought it was coming from the lawyer. He would do things like say exactly how many pages our last brief had been and then brag that he was going to submit a brief that was longer than that. He would say that in the introduction to the new brief that he was doing. So, and then it would just be this long vitriolic rant with very few citations to case law or evidence. So in other words, it didn't look very lawyerly. If you look at a legal brief, there's all these, it's constantly citing to quoting other cases, to particular exhibits in the case, et cetera, et cetera. These briefs that we would get from the Trump people would go 10, 15, 20 pages without a single citation. And the writing style was not very lawyerly either. Well, looking back on this, when I wrote the book, I was really struck by this because back in 2013, we didn't really know how Donald Trump wrote.
Right.
Like what it was Donald Trump's writing style. His books are all ghostwritten.
Yep.
Those weren't his. We'd never really seen what his writing looked like until Truth Social, especially. Twitter a little, obviously, but shorter. The long rants we see on Truth Social, that's really much more of a contemporary phenomenon. If you go back and read those briefs from Trump University case in 2013, you're like, wait a minute, Donald Trump wrote these. This isn't a lawyer. This is Donald Trump on the phone with the lawyer who was probably dictating,
right,
taking dictation. So it was really striking to me. But so a lot of things we can see in retrospect, but I've now come to believe that case 11 years ago, he was very much pulling the strings. The lawyer was just there to do his bidding. And we know that happened in the hush money case, the campaign cover-up case. And it was said right afterwards, oh yeah, Donald Trump was really the co-lawyer on this. He was the co-litigator on this.
So let me ask you a little bit about the current cases.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
There's a sense of frustration when you look at, I don't have every bullet point, but delayed sentencing from, July whenever to September 18th, now into November. One case is not going to be tried until who knows when. Indefinite suspensions. Can you even really prosecute this guy? What's an official act? What's an unofficial act? There's the sense that he's going to get out of all of it.
Right.
Do you think that's the most likely outcome here?
I still don't. I have been quiet about these issues the last month or so. I've been trying to take a little bit of time off and stuff, which was a foolish notion because, like, how was that going to happen in an election year? But there you go. I'm getting ready to talk about this a great deal. I'll give a bit of a preview now. I don't think all hope is lost. However, I am deeply furious and frustrated with what has happened here, because some of these things should not have happened. There is no excuse. He is a private citizen. I don't give a rat's ass if he's running for president. There's no rule, there's no law, there's no anything that just because you're a political candidate, you should get to have special treatment and get your criminal sentencing for conviction by unanimous jury. And you get to have that punted off until after the election. So in my view, everybody who went along with that needs a reckoning. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to elaborate on this a good bit more. But in my view, I don't think that Judge Merchan reached the right decision. But really, I think that I got to dig deeper on this, and I'm going to talk to some people. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. What the hell happened with the Manhattan DA's office on that one? I just don't understand how that was something that they agreed to. They needed to fight for that, and they didn't, as far as we can tell. Maybe there's more to the story, but now it doesn't look like it. I'll just say this. I believe a lot of these cases are going to end up in the right place in the end. The Trump University case had an appeal in the middle of the case that caused an 18-month delay from basically, I'd say, fall of 2014 to spring of 2016. The case was basically nothing because an issue had to go up on appeal about the applicability of the statute of limitations. Then it came back down. We won. And that's what set the table for the big settlement that we were able to get.
Yeah.
There was another delay in there that was because the judge in that case delayed trial from spring of 2016 to after Thanksgiving 2016. And so Trump did not have to stand trial on the Trump University case during the 2016 election. And that shouldn't have happened either. That was another travesty. But even when we see these delays, they are delays, they are not complete denials. And so I do believe a lot of these cases are going to get there. What ended up happening is we are going to have to be the ones to bring justice for Donald Trump in the year 2024. And if we can
electorally, you mean?
Electorally. And then we are going to have to vote to keep him out of office. And then I hope and pray, and we are going to have to get out there and be active and vocal. We got to start doing it now too. We got to push these prosecutors to finish the job in 2025 because this is ridiculous. This can't go on for any longer. We cannot have two systems of justice like this and just have a private jet lane for someone like Donald Trump, because that's what we've got. He's got his own goddamn system of justice all to himself right now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, there's been a lot of baseless allegations made by Trump and people around him that everything is biased against him, but there's been no substantiation. It's been that the charges are somehow connected to President Biden. There's no evidence. There's, all the allegations.
Yep.
What I do see as a layperson and as a non-lawyer is I see a Trump-selected judge in Eileen Cannon making favorable decisions to Trump.
Oh, yeah.
I see, as you point out, Judge Merchan making decisions that I can't really seem to find dictated by any kind of procedural guidelines, as you're pointing out, with regard to. So when I see the bias, it seems all the bias is in favor of Trump, if I'm honest.
That's exactly right. A lot of what he does there is the whole accuse the other side of that which you are guilty.
Yeah.
He has built a system for himself, used every lever at his disposal as somebody of wealth and privilege to be able to buy and bully his way into getting what he wants. And so he accuses everybody else of bias, but he's actually rigged up a system in which he has worked it. Yeah, and you have his own handpicked Supreme Court justices. Giving him immunity that has basically thrown a monkey wrench into the DCJ6 case too. Right. I believe that this is what happened. I think he worked together with one of his co-defendants in the Atlanta case to bring these puffed up allegations against Fani Willis that now are going to merit this ethics appeal issue that's not even going to get heard until October. So that case is not going on until 2025 either.
Yeah.
But he's been following this playbook that he's had for 50 years. And we need to follow our playbook back. But part of the problem with how to fight him is that you have to play the long game. And sometimes that means you're not going to get the result that you want at the time you want it. And the fact that we wanted to get some of these results before the 2024 election is heartbreaking. But I think that we saw enough from these things. We did get that jury conviction. He is a convicted felon. We're starting to see consequences for him. The people are going to have to finish the job at the ballot box in 24, followed by maybe the prosecutors and judges getting their acts together next year.
We've been speaking here with Tristan Snell. Check out Taking Down Trump, the book, the podcast, and the newsletter. Tristan, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, David. Anytime.